Good.
Welcome, everybody. Nice to see happy, smiley faces on a winter evening. We're so excited tonight. Andrew Samuel, you guys will get to meet him here shortly, but we are very excited that you're here, honored that you're here, Mr. Samuel, so thank you so much.
Welcome.
Did you just fly in today from?
Yesterday at 5 p.m.
Yesterday from India.
Yes.
So it took a quick trip.
Well, you know, Jerry's pretty convincing.
Jerry's very convincing. That's true. All right, guys, we'll jump into it here. Very excited everyone's here. This will be awesome. I'll do the fun part here. Okay. Elevate, get your notebooks out. This is exciting. Our lawyers are the only ones that cheer after this, but they were here last time. Elevate Investing Group and its affiliates do not provide tax, legal, investing, or accounting advice. This material has been prepared for informational purposes only. You should consult your own tax, legal, investing, and accounting advisors before engaging in any transaction. The material that follows should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security. We are not soliciting any action based on this material. It is only for educational and entertainment purposes.
There you go. Yay, thank you.
Anybody, how many people in the audience know what that picture is?
I have no idea. It looks vaguely familiar.
A lot of you do. This might clear it up for some of you. Jerry, where did we just get back from?
We were in Orlando last week at this time, and we all went there in that contraption there. That's an annual vacation that we do with our whole family, all of our kids who want to go and their kids. And so sometimes there's as many as 20 of us go down in that bus, and sometimes a few less.
Now, when we drive it, those are actually the position switch.
Yeah, the car is not actually towing the bus, it's usually the other way around. Yeah.
It's a powerful vehicle, but not quick. So this is us driving down. We take the whole family. Jerry takes the whole family. It's amazing. I told you you'd be seeing your smiling face up there, Sean.
Yeah. So Sean was driving. He did like the last 7-8 hours on the way down, which is great because I got to sleep.
And if you've never been in a motorhome, it's amazing with small kids. You know, you can't drive for 20 hours with small kids in car seats. That does not work. But they just get to hang out and roam around. It was an absolute blast. And just wanted to share some of these pictures with you. You get down there, it's gorgeous, good food, good company. Hit the parks. I'm not sure if they're afraid or just having a cute moment, but get the girls out on the canoe. This was actually the highlight of our entire week, and I'm sure you all knew that immediately from seeing it. But that face there, if you see the rest of these pictures, like this one for example, there's always something silly happening, except right now. She is the most content she's ever been in the universe. She got to meet Buzz Lightyear. So, obviously, business success, there's a financial component. You know, this Disney did not donate their services for the week.
I have no idea why. You should write them a letter and tell them how bored we are, and then they should pay us.
What I couldn't believe was, if you go to Disney, there's all kinds of Disney shirts everywhere. People have them. It seems like half the people are wearing some kind of Disney branded t-shirt. And a lot of them have different messages. The most amazing thing to me was how proud a lot of the people were with how expensive and how much money they spent on the day, and how proud Disney is to be more than happy to sell them the shirt. So there was one family that they all had different branded shirts. So the kids said #spoiled. I didn't see the moms, I wanted to. The dad said #broke. There's people walking around with most expensive day ever shirts on. And it's just amazing that not only Disney, they not only get top dollar, but they make the people proud to wear a shirt that
We
says,
don't own those shirts, by the way. And
No,
if
we
we
did not.
did, we would change the words on them. So.
But I think it's just absolutely amazing that Jerry takes the whole family down on an annual trip. I mean, talk about true wealth and using your money for something that builds relationship. So, Jerry, do you want to share a little bit what that means to you and why you choose
Well,
to do that?
you know, our last time we were together, we were talking about the important things of what matters in life and what defines your life. And for us, one of the most important things in life is what we leave in our children, not what we leave for our children to spend, but what we leave deposited inside of them. So we want to spend as much time with them as we can and impart to them things that will change the course of their life and empower them to become the most amazing people that they can possibly be. And so this is a place that inspires us. By the way, I hate amusement parks. We almost never even go into the parks. Disney is like criminally, outrageously expensive. I remember saying to my wife like 2 years ago, we looked at one of their timeshares. We went through the timeshare thing and I said to my wife, how can this be legal? This is like beyond immoral. This is like criminal. But anyway, that's my opinion of Disney. But we still go there because the food isn't bad. It's outrageously expensive, a whole lot more than what you would spend to eat at any place else. But you can get one of those shirts that says, I'm broke now, but we didn't do that anyway. My point is this. We go there because it inspires us. I noticed years ago that when you surround yourself with amazing things, you have a tendency to think differently. And your own perception of reality changes, and your belief system actually expands. I'm particularly drawn to architecture, and earlier Andrew and I were talking about Abu Dhabi and Dubai, two places in the world right next to each other that have spent more on architecture than anywhere else, and then Disney is probably close behind that here in the United States. So to be around the creativity of architecture, where somebody just wanted to do something outrageously incredible and didn't really care what it cost, that changes the way that you think. And so we like to take our kids here because we want to expand their experience of reality of life on the planet. And let me just say this about life on the planet, and maybe Andrew will say something about this tonight, but if you've only lived in the United States, you have no idea what life on this planet is like. This is not life on the planet. This is life for 3% of the people who've ever lived on this planet. And the rest of the planet lives extremely differently. Now, Disney and Abu Dhabi and Dubai, they're kind of at the other end of that spectrum of what life on the planet is like. But it's important to expand your understanding of what reality is and what is possible. So, this is the thought for the evening. Expose your children to an environment that celebrates creativity and makes anything that you can dream seem plausible. Doesn't that seem like something that would be good for a kid to grow up with their mind, that, wow, if I can think of something really amazing, I could actually create it. And so that's what we want to impart into our kids. And that's one of the reasons why we spend a lot of money on taking them to places that will change the way that they think. I just really appreciate your enthusiasm.
Yep.
Thank you. Wow. Yay! That was amazing. Thank you.
We're listening intently.
The creation side of what we do is more important than the cost trimming and all of those things that are important aspects of business. If you don't have the freedom to create, then you're going to be limited in what you're able to produce.
That is so true.
All right. Well, you may think that looks like me, but I actually hired a stunt double for that because I would never be caught looking that silly. But one other thing that happened at Disney was I got to realize a lifelong dream of going scuba diving. Spent the last couple months getting certified and had all kinds of fun. This is 90 feet down off the coast of Florida. Bunch of fish, bunch of wrecks.
Any treasure?
I didn't find any. It probably was there, but they didn't give it to me. Does anybody see what this is?
Yeah.
Do you know using a wide angle GoPro camera, how close you have to be to get a shot like that? Lemon sharks and reef sharks and bull sharks. It's pretty dang close. And if you're like me prior to diving, and you're like basically everyone I've talked to about going diving with sharks, everybody has the same reaction. You're doing what? Like, why would you do that? Have you not seen the movies? Have you not seen the TV shows? But I'll never forget getting around the dive masters that taught me scuba diving, and somebody said something about a shark, and they're all like, oh yeah, that's the best part of a dive. And you get with a group of divers, and they all go down around these sharks, and nobody is concerned in the slightest. So the difference between the perception that we have about something that's unknown and the actual reality of it sometimes are worlds apart. And I feel like that's a lot of times true with investing. We were on a phone call with one of our mentoring members this week, and they made a comment that my family thinks that if I get involved with investing, I'm gonna waste all my money and I'll retire broke. That was the mindset of someone that had never been exposed to that world. So we talk a lot about who you get around, who you learn from is so massively important, because the unknown can be scary. Sharks, I didn't know that they'd all be that comfortable. They're talking about going spear fishing and a big bull shark coming over and he wants some flounder. And the one guy's like, yeah, I would just give it to him, but I have a friend that fights him for it. And he'll battle 2 and 3 at a time before he gives it to him. And it's like, this is a different world. It's the same. It's the same with investing. It's the same with financial freedom, with commercial real estate, with passive investing. The things that we are not exposed to, that weren't normal for us growing up and aren't in our friend circle, are unknown, they're scary, they're nerve-wracking. But I can honestly say, my heart did not skip a single beat when these sharks started swimming around. I was not concerned in the slightest, because I was with my dive master, I was with a whole group of people where this was just normal. Mm-hmm. So it's so important that you get around people that what the reality you want is not some far-fetched thing for them, it's just normal everyday life.
That is such a big deal. You should write that down. Like right now, you should just take a moment and write that down. That you need to hang around people for whom where you want to go is a normal thing in life. And if you do, that will become normal to you.
Yeah. So a lot of us, we want something consciously, but our subconscious feels like it's impossible because we've never seen it as a reality. But surrounding yourself with people where it's just normal life rewires your subconscious expectations to, hey, this is normal. And if you read some of the books out there or listen to Jerry's talk on different parts of your mind, you know that the subconscious mind is where the power lies. So the unknown can be scary. Surround yourself with an experienced group or a mentor, Don't do one or the other. And I thought it would be cool, our syndication mentoring group, would you mind just standing up for a moment? Yeah, cool. So the people that are sitting down, just take a look at these ones and connect with them afterwards. These are people that are taking their investing to another level. These are people that have experience and success at a certain level and are moving into more commercial assets, larger assets. So connect with them. These are some of these good people that you would want to hang around.
So we are so honored and blessed this evening to have Andrew Samuel with us. Andrew serves as the Chairman, CEO, and Director of LINKBANK Corp. and LINKBANK and has a long track record of industry success. He's helped take banks from insignificance to being listed on the NASDAQ global market and has been involved in the mergers and acquisitions of more than 10 companies with an aggregate deal value surpassing $1.5 billion. Andrew has shaped workplaces that are listed as the best places to work in their region and created culture centered around servant leadership. Andrew lives in the central Pennsylvania area with his wife of 36 years. They're blessed with 5 daughters, 4 sons-in-law, and 12 grandchildren. I've had the great honor and pleasure of getting to know Andrew, although I've heard about him as this mystery business mogul guy for like a decade or two. And I thought, man, someday I need to meet this guy. And somehow I actually met the 2 lovely bankers in the rear, Jessica and Missy, if you would stand up, please, and wave so that everybody knows who you are. This is really important. Everybody should be looking at them because oftentimes real estate deals have something to do with banking. I don't know why that is. It's just a strange relationship. And so if you're ever in a real estate deal, you might be thinking about a bank, and I would encourage you to go see these lovely two young ladies in the rear. And we're just so blessed to have Andrew with us and to hear his story. He's brought his book along, which I have read, absolutely astonishing. I would encourage every person in this room to read it. You know, all of us know our own stories, but it's amazing when you hear somebody's story who started so differently than what we did, in a way that would seem far less potential for expansion and for opportunity. And yet, Andrew's story is extravagant. So I would like to invite him to the front, and everybody please give it up for Andrew Sanders.
Thank you, Jerry. It is an honor to be here, and I do want to address a couple of items first. And, Michael, I hope, and Jerry, oh, good, thank you. Jerry, I hope when Michael goes on these scuba things with sharks, that his insurance is paid up with Gibble Insurance. That would be a good idea, right? But no, that's wonderful to see, and you know, those two things I can't help but just talk a little bit about that, because if anybody wants to ever go to Disney, my wife is an expert on Disney. She goes to Disney maybe 6 times a year, because one of the reasons is we have 12 grandchildren, and we can't take them all at once, so you have to take them. Yeah, those are my grandchildren right there. You know, so they are 7 to 7 months. The twins are 7 months. So, and you know, for me, I'll be honest with you, every time I look at that picture, I get very emotional, because you know, so much of, I mean, just look at their faces. I mean, you know, how can you not get up and be motivated?
Yes.
You know, and so they're great. But so my wife is a season pass holder there, and so she's there often. She knows every part of Disney, and I can tell you. By the way, Jerry, they just raised their prices to over $200. But she can also tell you about cost-efficient ways to go. And but Disney is an inspiration when you go there and think about the creativity there. They never cease to amaze me, you know, just with what they've done there. The other thing that Jerry and by the way, we didn't rehearse this. Jerry and I didn't rehearse this, but I should touch on this, because this is a fundamental piece, and I think Jerry touched on this with his quote. And I'll just read, and this is in the book, by the way, you know. Our country is unique in that you don't need to be born into privilege, have a high IQ, or another special advantage to be successful. The opportunities are endless, and everyone has the potential to do something amazing with their life.
Yes.
Just by the virtue of being born in America, you know. And if you travel across the world, you begin to realize that, you know, that we have an amazing head start. You know, it's like the 100-yard dash, and we're starting at the 90-yard mark. You know, I mean, we gotta win. You know, but it just, we are so fortunate in that way. You know, and it's important to remember that. You know, so I have some words for you, and I'll just start with, you know, I did bring some sample copies. They're in the back. It is available on Amazon. So it's easy to get, but there's some free samples there if you want, or if you want to make a donation, that's fine. All of the proceeds are going to not-for-profit organizations. So, but in the book, you know, I talk a lot about certain principles that you touched on already, principles of focus, persistence, humility. What's your legacy? What's your purpose behind what you're doing? Importance of family. All of those are covered in the book, and they're just tidbits, you know. And one of the reasons I wrote that book was, you know, my children would always say, Dad, you need to document these things, because you have a simple way of just articulating these things where you don't feel like you need to read a Harvard Review paper on persistence. You put it into plain English, and so why don't you document that? So I did that, but I'll talk a little bit more about that, you know. So I want to just start a little bit by giving you a background on myself. You can probably guess, or you have already, that I'm originally from India. I was born in the foothills of the Himalayas in a small town called Kapurthala, India. And it's right on the border with Pakistan. So when I was born, there was a lot of tension with Pakistan because that was about 20, 30 years after independence from the British. You know, Pakistan and India were split between Muslims on the Pakistan side and Hindus on the India side. And of course, a lot of families had to migrate back and forth to get to closer to their families, etc. So there was a lot of tension there, you know. My parents were pretty poor, and my dad was a military man, made about $50 a year, and out of that, he was very faithful in sending about $10 out of the 50 to take care of his grandma, his mother, who was blind and bedridden, in a small town called Bangalore in the southern part of India. So, you know, so we didn't really have much. And growing up, we stayed in an extended family. So I stayed with my uncles and aunts, and there was probably about 16 of us in a room, maybe 14 by 14. We ate there, we slept there, we lived there. We didn't have any running water. We didn't have any electricity. And it was that environment. You know, the floor, it was a basic hut, and our floor essentially were dirt floors. But for those of you who don't know, you know, we used to actually kind of spread cow dung over the floor. And when you spread cow dung on the floor, it seals the floor, and therefore, you know, dust doesn't rise. Because if you're sleeping on a dust floor, you don't want the dust to rise or be all over you. But when you spread the cow dung, it seals everything. So when we were able to sleep, we didn't get up with dust and things like that, you know. But we had you know, we were very happy. I mean, there were 16 of us in this room. You know, in the evening, we would all lie down side by side, and then we would get up in the morning, fold up any pillows or sheets we had, and then one corner would be set aside for an open fire, which is where my aunts and uncles cooked. We were lucky if we had one meal a day, and I remember many times where my mom used to say, Andrew, sleep on your stomach, because you won't feel the hunger pains as much as if you sleep on your back. Because by sleeping on your stomach, the pressure of the ground will help you deal with the hunger. And so, you know, that was the environment we grew up in. But amazingly, even in that environment, I learned a lot about entrepreneurism and business. You know, for example, everybody had you know, mud floors, and so everybody wanted the cow dung to spread on the floor to seal the dirt. So one of the things we always did in the daytime was actually we would follow, as you know, cows are sacred in India, so nobody touches them. They can roam anywhere they want, and so we would just follow these cows, and when they did their business, there'd be like 10 kids rush in to grab the cow dung, and we would all grab it, put it in a container, and kind of take it back. An interesting thing about cow dung, so we would take it back and we would use some of it to seal our floor, but then we would sell it to our neighbors too. And the reason is cow dung, if you don't know, we needed it to spread on the floor to keep the dust locked in. But you can also make cow dung patties. And when you make cow dung patties, they burn really well. And in India, with the population there, you know, you can't make wood fires because there's no wood around, because there's just so many people that those trees and all have been cut down. So, but the patties really burn well, and we cooked over open fire, so we used the patties. But that was the early start of this entrepreneurial attitude, you know, about saying, how can we make some money to have a meal on this particular day? So I learned a lot about being very focused, because think about it. You are going to be very focused if your sole purpose is to find a meal that day. And if that means fighting over cow dung, you're going to fight over cow dung, you know, and bringing it back and selling it to the neighbors, you know. In terms of just, I mean, we had the best time just growing up in that environment. It was interesting. We didn't have indoor plumbing, There was one well, and everybody used that well. And I know what's going through your mind. So what do you do for a bathroom, you know? Well, I can tell you, going to the bathroom was a community event. And the reason for that was, you just went out in the field, you know? So everybody just went out, and has anybody seen Slumdog Millionaire?
Yeah.
Okay, you know the two little kids in the beginning of the movie carrying a can? That's a can of water headed to the open air environment. Well, that was us, you know. All the kids would grab a can of water, would go out into the field, make a big circle, did our business, you know, gossiped, did everything, and then came back, you know. But it was such an environment that was very positive for us. We didn't feel like, at that time we didn't know, so we didn't feel like we lacked for anything, you know. And so that was, you know, that was my part that I was growing up. In the book, I talk about faith, you know, and it's an important part of everything that I've done, you know. And as you listen to me, you'll hear a lot about focus, persistent, etc. But keep a special focus on faith and prayer, because they play a critical role in this process. As I mentioned to you, my grandmother, when she was about 55, she went blind because, you know, they cooked over an open fire. So, and she was in a confined area, and over the years, the smoke actually impacted her eyes, and she became blind at a very early age. And so for 30 years, she was bedridden and in bed, and guess what she did all day? All she did was pray all day. And she prayed for her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, the great-great-grandchildren to come, because what else was she gonna do? You know, and that's all she did. And that's why when I look at my life, and when you see these grandchildren, you know, that is the power of prayer. So I challenge you to make sure prayer is a big part of your life, you know. But that's not enough, you know what I mean? Prayer is an important component, but you've got to apply yourself too. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, you know. So because of those prayers, you know, my dad was in the military, and he was fortunate because in 1964, Zambia, which used to be known as Northern Rhodesia in the southern part of Africa, gained its independence from the British. And the first thing they did was they wanted all the British soldiers to leave, and they wanted to set up their own defense force, made up of people, their own folks, you know. And so they needed soldiers to come train their military. And they didn't want to go to the US or to the Soviet Union, because if you remember, in the 60s, that was the height of the Cold War, and no country wanted to be aligned with the West or the East, you know. So India was always known as a non-aligned country, meaning they were not pro-West, they were not pro-East. They were not affiliated with the Soviet Union or the US. So they came to India looking for soldiers, you know, and so they had 80 positions, and they had close to 80,000 applicants for these 80. Why so many applicants? Well, my dad's salary was $50 a year. You know, he could go to Zambia and make $3,000 a year, which is a huge increase, you know. So even though it was a new continent, new people, he didn't know anything about it, you know, it was scary. Remember what Michael said, a scary thought. But he applied, you know, and it was interesting. Out of those, so the Zambian government started looking through these portfolios, you know, because they had military credentials, so they were going through it. They got so fed up looking through these files because there were so many. And here's what they got really fed up with. You know, if you remember, traditional Indian names are usually things like Agrawal, Subramaniam, you know, things you can't pronounce, you know. And so they just got fed up going through these names. And so what they decided was, they said, you know what, we're just gonna look for the simple names. And guess what the simple names were? Samuel, Ezekiel, Joseph, Matthew. And what do you think those all are? Christian names, you know? But they were easy to pronounce, they were easy to deal with. So all they did was didn't look at the credentials, they just took the people with these simple Christian names, you know? Now, I challenge you and say, look, my dad had to take the initiative to get there, get his credentials there. But the other part of that is, do you think my grandmother's prayers played a role in that? Absolutely. So I want you to remember that, God doesn't want us to just sit on a seat and say, Lord, I'm praying, and you do what you, we need to take initiative. In that case, my dad took the initiative to apply. So that's how we got to Zambia. So my dad went to Zambia first in 1969 to check out the country. He set up a shop there, and then my mom then took the four of us. And now remember, we were brought up in a very poor background in India. No TVs at that time. We had never seen Westerners. We had never seen Africans. So we got on a plane in Bombay, and we got up in Nairobi, Kenya, and imagine the shock we had, because imagine if you've been isolated, without TVs or anything. Today's a global market. You know what people look like in different parts of the world. In those days, all we knew was our little village, and so it was amazing. We got there, my mom didn't speak any English, and she had these 4 little children. She flew us out to Zambia. We got settled there. So I lived there 11 years. I went to high school in Zambia, and when I was 17 and graduating from high school, I decided that I wanted to go to a Christian college if possible. And I was fortunate that there was a Christian college right here back in our backyard in Central Pennsylvania, Manthei College. And my neighbor in Zambia had taught at Messiah, so he was going to the same church we were, and he said, you should go ahead and apply. And I had an associate that had come here earlier too. So I applied. Messiah accepted me, but there was a problem. The tuition was $4,000 a year. I know you want investing, so you better do the math here, okay? My dad was making $3,000 a year. So is that equation going to work? Absolutely not, But Messiah was kind enough, and I'm eternally grateful to them for my education, because they stepped up and said, Andrew, you know what? You get yourself here between work, study, scholarships, and if you're willing to work, we'll make sure that your $4,000 is covered, And so they would. So the financial piece was taken care of. But you have another issue. When you are an international student coming to the country, you must have a sponsoring family. A family who says, Andrew gets sick, Andrew has an issue, we'll take care of him, etc. I didn't know anybody here. But we were fortunate that, lo and behold, a family in Mountjoy, Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, Wilbur and Lois Hess, lived on Mount Pleasant Drive in Mountjoy, stepped up. They had 4 daughters, and they said, you know what, Andrew, get yourself over here, we'll be your sponsor, but it's temporary. They said, within 6 months, we want you to find a new sponsoring family, but this will just get you into the country. And I said, that's a fair deal, let's do that. So interesting, so I flew out from Zambia, having never been west of Cairo. So this was all new for me. I flew into Philadelphia, and this is how naive I was in Philadelphia. So I show up at the Philadelphia airport waiting for my connection to Harrisburg. I'm going through customs in Philadelphia, and the gentleman says, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm a student, I'm going to Messiah College, expecting that he would know what Messiah College was. Because I thought there were maybe a dozen universities and colleges in the U.S., not knowing there's thousands. So he looked at me kind of oddly, like, why should I know where Messiah is? And so I got through that. I was waiting for my flight, so I'm sitting on a chair. Across from me are 2 lit up boxes. And I'm starved because when I fly, I don't eat because I get airsick, So I'm looking at, and I'm watching all these people show up, do something, and walk away with a drink. Show up, do something, walk away with a snack. And I'm trying to figure out, what are they doing? I had never seen a vending machine. So here I am, starved, but I had no idea what they were doing. I mean, that's how naive I was when I got to Philadelphia. Anyhow, I got to Messiah College, and when I walked into Miller Dorm, I thought, I literally thought I had gone to heaven. I mean, this was a beautiful facility from what I was accustomed to. So I spent 4 years at Messiah. One of the, the first few months into being at Manthei, actually it was the first 3 weeks, I met this girl who said, she talked to her parents and they said they'd be happy to be my sponsors. Because remember, the Hess family said it's a short-term deal. And so I called the Hess family and I said, listen, I've found a local sponsor and they're from Maryland and they're happy to sponsor me. And they said, nah, we like you, so we'll just stay your sponsors, But lo and behold, that girl that I met who wanted to be my sponsor is the lady in that McGowan. It was my wife's family, who had offered to sponsor me. So we've been married 36 years. We've known each other for 40 years in college, but we've been married 36 years. And so that's how I got here. And we got married in 1983. I graduated in 1984. And now the next shift, next phase of my life really comes into play, which is really where the entrepreneurship and building companies and banks comes into play. So I immediately, upon graduation in 1984, most of you know the economy was terrible. Not many jobs. And so what I did was, I took a job in the restaurant business. And I was, do you remember the LB's Big Boy?
Oh, yeah.
Any? Okay. So I took the night shift manager there I was the manager from 11 to 7, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. And then I'd get home and at 8 o'clock, I would look through the newspaper in the wanted section for job opportunities and I'd call and then I'd go to interviews till 3 p.m. Then I'd go to bed and then get up so that's kind of how I started. But here's the interesting thing, at that time, so here I am, a college graduate, working the night shift thing, and it's the night shift is the worst, because LB's, as you know, didn't serve alcohol or anything. But 2 a.m. in the morning, guess who shows up in rows? Okay? Kind of people that are puking all over the place, belligerent, etc., and try motivating and managing busboys, waiters, waitresses, cooks on that shift. But you know what? I really believe that God put me there for a reason. And one of those reasons was, if I could motivate those people, it didn't matter where else I managed, I was going to motivate people, if you can do it in that. The other thing was, remember, I'm only in the country 4 years. I had no idea what a coconut pie was, or what banana pudding was, or what a sundae was, anything like that, or even food, chicken fingers. A lot of these things, you're in college and you're eating at the cafeteria, and so nobody ever told me what these things were. But in that night shift is where I learned, how, what do you do with your fork, with your knife? When do you use them, etc. Because I didn't know these things, and so you can imagine later on in my career, I'm at a dinner and you're looking in, there's 2 wine glasses and another glass and silverware here, silverware there. What do you do with it? Well, I learned all that in that environment. Wow. And so really, sometimes we don't realize that God puts you in a place and we should take advantage of being in that place to learn as much as we can, because He's preparing you for something greater. And so that was my first job. So every morning I would get on the phone and I would dial. Everybody would say, we're not hiring. I used to walk by banks and I used to think that's a nice place to be. It just seems like, because whenever I walk by that branch, the manager's always just reading this Wall Street Journal. He's not really doing much. It's air conditioned. There's coffee being served. Everybody seems happy. I was like, maybe that's what I want to do, So I started calling banks, and but I soon realized that all the secretaries would just, and this is where persistence comes into play. All the secretaries would kind of screen the calls. So you'd call in and say, I'm looking for an opportunity. Oh, we don't have any opening. Well, I just want to meet with the head of personnel. No, we don't have any opportunities. And I can be pretty persistent, and I knew I needed to get through. So what I suddenly realized was, don't call during business hours. Call at 5:36, because guess what? the administrative assistants and all, guess what? They're leaving at 5. Who's usually there? The leaders are usually working later. And so I started calling around 5:36, and one day I called the old Commonwealth National Bank. Many of you probably don't remember them, but they were at Penn Square. But the branch I called was at the square in Harrisburg, and phone rang and rang and rang, and a gentleman picked up, and you could tell I was disturbing him, and he said, "Hello, we're closed." And I said, I just would like to come in and chat, for just give me 10 minutes. And he said, "We don't have any openings." So I said, "Just give me 10 minutes." And he said, "Okay." And so that was the first interview I got. But again, the persistence, I would encourage you, don't give up. Don't give up. I mean, you cannot just sit back. You have to be, if you want to be successful in business, in real estate investment, you have to be persistent, Anyhow, so I had this interview. So I said 10 minutes. I met with this gentleman for 2 hours. And he said, "We don't have any openings," but he's like, "I've got to get you to meet some other folks at the bank." And so that's how I got into a management training program at the Commonwealth National Bank. I was the second trainee they hired, and at that time, 2 gentlemen hired me, their CEO, Chip Merrill, and their number 2, Chuck Pearson, and just remember those names because it comes up later. So I spent 2 years going through a training program, and I learned all kinds of things about banking, and then from there, after that, Commonwealth was sold to Mellon Bank, and I knew I had a secure job. Mellon said you'd be secure, but I knew community banking wasn't going to be what I thought it was, because in those 2 years, I learned that one of the things I liked about banking is that there was an inner desire, for me at least, to impact people's lives. And I felt like as a banker, I was impacting people. Because those were the days when, guess what? You want a car loan, you want a home loan, you want a home equity, you want a business loan, you just went to the local banker, and they would just say, "Yeah, come back tomorrow, here's a check, come back tomorrow and sign the papers." But they were impacting lives, because the beauty about banking is, for every, to give you an idea, for every $1 million of capital, we could leverage it tenfold. Meaning we can do $10 million of projects in the community. So imagine the impact it has, And so it started to dwell on me that, Andrew, your purpose really here is to impact people's lives, because you can do so much for these folks. And that impacting people's lives has stuck with me ever since, So at that time, Mellon bought Commonwealth, and I knew community banking wasn't going to be the same. So I left and joined another bank for 10 years, and I wanted to be desperately a vice president, because in banking, keep in mind, if you're a VP, you've arrived. That's sort of like the gold standard, you know what I mean? So I worked hard, and I kept saying to my mom, I'll feel better when I get to be a VP. That's all I need to do. And she asked me one day, she said, "Why do you want to be a VP?" I explained to her, that's the gold standard. Once you're a VP, you're something in banking, and everybody gives you respect and things like that. And she looked at me and she just said, if that's why you're doing it, you shouldn't be doing that. And God's never going to bless you with that opportunity. I said, what do you mean, Mom? Don't you want that for me? I mean, we had nothing, and to be a VP and have a decent income, it's what, And she said, no. She said, you really need to think about your purpose. Why do you want these things? If your purpose in wanting to be a VP is to impact people, impact customers, then that's a different thing. But if your purpose is not pure, she said, why should God bless you with that opportunity, And it stuck with me, because it's driven me all along. And that's why I talk about purpose in the book. And I challenge you, think about real estate investing, your business. What is the purpose? And I know most of you say, well, it's to make money. I want to go to Disney. I want to go to Disney like Bill. But so all I'm going to tell you is that, ask yourself what that purpose is. And so early on, that's what began to kind of crystallize in my heart. is that God wanted me to have a focus on impacting lives. Guess what? In that process, I knew I was gonna make a lot of money, but that wasn't the end game, you know, money. The end game was impact people, and in the process, you will be blessed, you know? So anyhow, so at Commonwealth, not Commonwealth, so I spent 10 years at this bank, and I got to a point where I was running the capital region, which was Dauphin, Cumberland, and York County for them, and I wanted us to be bold as a company, you know, and I was trying to tell our management that, listen, there's an opportunity here across Pennsylvania for us to grow in a big way, but the bank was headquartered in Lancaster, so their focus was Lancaster County. I said, there's lots of opportunities outside, and we need to take advantage of it. And so there was conflict there for a little bit. So at that time, one of the gentlemen that had hired me at Commonwealth National Bank, Chuck Pearson, became the new CEO of a company called Harris Savings Bank, which was a thrift in central PA, and it was a mutual. In other words, it wasn't a public company. It was owned by the depositors. He called me, and I joined him to run the commercial banking side for him. And you know, when I joined the company, we had, you know, 99% of our assets were residential loans, but we wanted to grow the commercial side. So I joined the company to do that, and we took the company public. We renamed it Waypoint Financial. Some of you probably recognize that name. We grew from about $1 billion to about $5.3 billion. We grew the commercial portfolio about $1.4 billion in 7 years, and I became president of that company. And at that time, our board was aging, and so they looked at it and said, you know what, it's time to sell the bank. And so we negotiated a sale with Sovereign Bank Corp and sold the company. It was an $800 million transaction to Sovereign Bank Corp. And I remained to run Pennsylvania and Maryland with them, but within the first 6 months, it was very obvious to me that culturally we didn't fit. You know, my focus was impacting people's lives. Sovereign's was grow, make more money, you know, it was more of a greed and me mentality. And so after 6 months, I told the CEO there that I was not staying and leaving. And so I left with 35 employees who joined me in starting a company called Greystone Bank. And we started that. And Greystone Bank, you know, the fundamental focus was, our mission statement was, we want to impact people's lives positively. And we don't care who it is, whether you're a customer or not. If you come in contact with our employees, we wanted you to walk away feeling like you had been impacted positively. So an example would be, if the UPS guy drops off packages at your branch every day, we want him or her to say, this is my favorite spot. This is my favorite stop. And if they say that, guess what? They're going to become customers. I mean, if this is their favorite spot, it's not going to be long before they become a customer. You know, now your employees have to ask them, but once they ask, how can they say no if they say it's their favorite spot? So, you know, we built that company based on that, and it was amazing. You know, we grew that company from nothing to about $2.8 billion in assets in just over 5 years. And for those of you who are in banking, that's just unheard of, you know. But it really was the core focus. Remember I talked about purpose. What was the purpose behind Greystone? We didn't talk about making money. We talked about impacting people's lives. And guess what? The making money part came with it. But it wasn't the end game, you know. And so we grew that aggressively to about 65 branches from the Philadelphia suburbs to, all the way to Hagerstown, Maryland. And we were growing rapidly. We had a great group of directors, and what came to our attention was, now we came into the crisis. If you remember the Great Crisis, which started in 2008, so that started, and we were fine financially, but we started looking around, and this is where I encourage you as investors, you know, whether it's in real estate or in business, you always need to be thinking about what's coming. You know, where are you headed? You cannot have your head stuck in the sand in today. You need to be thinking through where you're going. So we started looking at it. We saw the crisis coming. We saw, in terms of what was going on in the external climate, we saw what was going on with Dodd-Frank, which was a whole set of new regulations for banking. And we decided, we talked with the board, and we all decided that, this was the time to really look at partnering up and cashing out of the scenario, But the board made the determination. They said there were three things they wanted to do. One was whoever our partner was that we were going to sell to had to agree to three things. One, it had to be a company that was trading at a very low multiple. And Susquehanna at that time was trading at tangible book. And secondly, they had to be, a combined company needed to be one of the biggest in the country. So when we combined Susquehanna and Greystone, we were the 34th largest bank in the country. So that was an important factor because we felt you needed the scale to withstand what was coming. And then the final thing was our board wanted our management team to be in firm control of the combined management team. So I joined Susquehanna as the president and CEO of the bank and president of the holding company. So we put the teams together. But again, what I would emphasize is we took the opportunity to say, where are things going? How's this going to work? And what's the anticipated thing? And then made a decision, a calculated decision to merge with them, The beauty was, as I told you, by the time we closed the deal, our shareholders more than tripled their investment in this scenario. But it was important for us to think ahead and not just be stuck in our world to say, I'm comfortable here, so I don't want to do anything. And that's where you'll read in the book about boldness. You got to step out sometime, And I think you talked about it. It can be scary, but you got to make those decisions, So anyway, we combined the company, and I was there for about 2 years. And as you know, what God had laid on my heart was the style of impacting people's lives, values-based company, with honesty, integrity. When you say something, you mean it, you follow through. All of those things, I began to feel like I was beginning to compromise in this new company. And it wasn't intentional or anything, but I just didn't feel like we were holding up to the standards we needed. And I felt like the longer I stayed, the longer I was one of the people that was not part of that culture, And so my wife and I prayed about it, and I was clearly led to, the Lord said by December 31st, 2014, I will have new opportunities for you. I had no clue what he was going to do with my life, But anyhow, so this is where boldness comes into play again, because I was president of the company, and when you're a public company, people, if you leave, people wonder what's going on and could impact your stock price, etc. So I gave the company 6 months notice. I said, listen, I'm leaving by 12/31/14, but here's my notice in June, and let's work out a meaningful communication plan, etc. And it was slowly, I said, we're just not compatible in terms of values and where I think and how I think a company should be run, etc. And it was during this time that we also decided that, if you're leaving and, do we do a search, etc. And that's when we determined that we should just sell Susquehanna. And so we actually negotiated the deal with BB&T, announced that in October. But prior to the announcement, I told the CEO of BB&T that I would not be staying, and I explained to him that, my vision is to impact people's lives, and I want to make a difference, and there's a style and a values base that I operate under. And so I said I would not be staying, and they looked at me and they said, okay, wait a minute, you have this golden parachute that is payable to you if you wait 9 months. But remember, when I had prayed, God had said, you're gone by 12/31/14. And and I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to be leaving a major golden parachute here, but I knew that God wanted me to do that. And it was in the midst of this, a friend of mine who had been a bank investor with me for a long time, Ken Lehman from Manthei, Pennsylvania, called me and just said, hey, Andrew, there's a bank in Florida, their chairman's a faith-based individual, and he wants to grow the bank with certain values, but he wants to grow it aggressively. And he said, I immediately thought about you giving them some advice on how to do this. And so I had said to him, sure, if I'm in Florida, I'll talk to him. So I met with this gentleman, Raleigh, and his partner, Doug, who was the audit committee chair of this company. And when we sat together at a high-powered lunch at Cracker Barrel in Florida, we sat there, we're chatting, and they said, how do you build values-based company? And I talked to them about how you've got to be intentional about it, how you've got to be authentic, you've got to be real, and you've got to be focused on what you're doing and really focus on the employee, and they'll generate the energy and the passion that'll carry on to customers, etc. And so we talked, and then at the end of the meeting, they looked at me and they said, hey, they slid in front of me what's called a proxy statement that all public companies have to do, which has all the compensation for CEOs, presidents, etc. They slid it to me. They said, listen, Andrew, we know how much money you make, but we'd like you to help us, but we can't pay you anywhere what you're making. And I just kind of laughed and I said, oh, no. I said, no, listen, I manage 3,400 employees with 250 branches, and you want me to leave that to come to this bank with 5 branches and 200 million in assets? And they said, yeah, but we were also told that you're a man of faith, and sometimes your decisions don't really look solid from a traditional conventional way. And I said, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not going to take 80% pay cut. That's not rational. And they just laughed. They said, listen, we just thought we'll give it a try. So I went back home. I came back home, and and this was during a lot of these negotiations going on with BB&T at this time too. And I came home, and my wife said, how'd your meeting go? I said, oh, hon, you don't even want to know where they are. And she said, where are they? I said, Plant City. I said, you don't even know where Plant City is. She said, I have no idea where Plant City, Florida is. So I said, oh, it's nothing. So as the days went by, a few weeks later, my wife looked at me and she said, I've been in prayer, and I think you should talk to those people. So that's my advice to you gentlemen. Always listen to first time. So I said, honey, what are you talking about? We got 5 children, they're in the midst of weddings and college and all. I said, I'm not gonna take that kind of a pay cut and give up my stock options and grants and all of that. And she said, I think you ought to talk to them. So she and I flew down, and we had dinner with the board over there. We didn't talk any business. All we talked about was people and our desire to impact people's lives. And so when we walked out of that dinner, my wife said, this is where we need to be. So anyhow, that's how I ended up in Florida. But here's the irony. I didn't know anybody in Florida. So I'm going from central Pennsylvania, 500,000 people? I'm going to an area that has 4 million people just in Tampa. But the general area has 7 or 8 million people, and there's, at that time there was 500 people a day moving to Florida. So I'm going there, I don't know anybody, whereas over here, I knew everybody because I was raised in the banking environment here. And I'm going there and I'm saying, Lord, what have I done? And it was easy to get discouraged, but it was one step at a time. We built that company, we grew it from 200 million to about $1 billion in 3 years, and we ended up selling the company because I wanted to come back to central Pennsylvania, which was home to me. But the point I want to make, remember I talked to you about that golden parachute that I left behind at Susquehanna at BB&T? Well, when I went to Sunshine and we built it, we sold that company, that golden parachute was 3 times the size of this one. Now, there's a lesson there. I don't want you to focus on the financial side. I want you to focus on one thing, one is be faithful to God's call. He stirs up your heart in ways, He creates opportunities, and all He's asking for you is take time in silence to just listen to what He wants, I mean, I remember when I told people I was leaving Susquehanna to go to this bank called Sunshine Bank, 200 million, 5 branches. One of my friends from New York who was an investment banker who knows the stuff looked at me and said, "You gotta be the dumbest guy." And he said, "What are you doing? Why would you leave the prestige of this role and the golden parachute to do that?" And I said, "Scott, you want to understand this, but I have to do this. I mean, this is where God wants me, So my first thing to you is, be faithful. But here's the thing, don't just sit there in faith. Take the step. I had to take a bold step to leave my home community because I knew that's where God wanted me. And I went there, and guess what? It was just in a few short time, I really got to know a lot of people. God brought people into my life there that connected me with others, and we were able to grow that company through that process, So, we sold Sunshine, and the next question was, what are you gonna do next? And I thought I was gonna sit on the beach, retired, etc., but there was too much energy and passion and wanting to impact lives. And so, as I always do, my wife and I prayed about it, and we sold the company, and on January 1st, 2018, and the cash was in the bank, and I thought I'm retired, okay. Then January 2nd, 3 p.m., I looked at my wife and I said, "I can't do this." And she said, "What do you mean you can't do this? You're retired, you're gonna sit around in the sun," and and I said, "I can't do this." And she said, "What do you want to do then?" "I want to come back to central Pennsylvania, and I want to do a bank, but I don't want to just do a bank." So we said, "Well, what does God want you to do, So He laid 3 things on my heart. He said, "I want you to do a bank in central Pennsylvania because of all the merger, etc. But this time I want you to have 3 areas of focus. 1, impart and pour into the next generation of leaders." So Jerry and Michael talked about mentors. I challenge you, to really look for mentors. And there are people like me who really want to pour into the next generation, because I want the next generation of bankers who are honest, who do what they say they're going to do, who are passionate about what they're doing, want to impact people's lives positively, And but wherever you are, find those mentors who want to pour into you, and and most of that advice is going to be free, so take it, But so He laid on my heart, develop the next generation of leaders. So if you look at our company now, we have about 48 employees, and I can tell you, a vast majority of them are less than 40. There are a few people over that, but most of them are under 40. But it is to pour into these folks because they will be the future leaders of in the banking industry in the community. So God said, that's one thing I want you to do. Second thing, I want you to give back to the community. So immediately we set up a big foundation, which is funded by a certain percentage of the profits from the bank in the 10% tithing concept will go into the foundation, and then the foundation independently identifies needs in central Pennsylvania to contribute to in the areas of literacy, women issues, in terms of homelessness, items of that nature, So we created that foundation, which is up and running. And then the third thing he said to me was, invest in technology, because the next generation of bankers want to do business on their iPhone, etc. And so we're investing a lot of money in technology. So last year, our bank was about 30 million in assets. We're now about 230 million in assets in a year. And most banks to get to from 30 million to 230, it takes about 100 years. Okay? But we've been able to do that in a year. But a lot of that is because of God's favor, because of our faithfulness, etc. So what I really want to leave you with is, real estate investing, business investing, whatever you're doing, I talk about, persistence, being focused, being humble, focusing on doing the right things and having the right purpose. You need to apply all those things, but you need to have a fair amount of faith, knowing that God is with you when you do these things. But you know what? God's favor is with you if you're doing these things for the right reasons. And what I mean by the right reasons is, it's not driven around selfish desires, a greedy heart, etc. As Jerry and Michael talked earlier about, the Disney trip, etc. Those are not those are pouring into the children, the grandchildren, creating memories, which create legacy. I talk about legacy in this book too. What is that legacy going to be? It is not, your legacy isn't going to be how much money you left in the bank. Your legacy is what you've poured into the grandchildren, your children, anybody that comes in contact with you. What kind of impact have you had on their lives? So I challenge you, you want to be successful. Don't be ashamed of being successful. I'm not ashamed to make money, and I'll tell you, I'm happy to do that, but I also know that it's not for selfish reasons. It's not selfish way. I want to be able to, make money so I can bless others, not just my immediate family, but anybody that I come in contact with. And therefore, I'm starting a new bank, LINKBANk. People ask me, aren't you scared? I mean, how are you going to say no? Because guess what? I know God's favor is with me. And so I know this is going to be successful. But if my purpose changes to greed, selfishness, and selfish needs, and things like that, then why would God's favor be with me? So just remember that, we want to be successful financially, whether it's in real estate investing, in business, but the whole idea behind this is to make a lot of money, to bless others and everybody around us, So if you have that kind of a motive, it's different than just making money for selfish reasons, okay? So the book is back there, they're free, so just free, or you can leave a donation because it is for charity, but feel free to get one of those. Did I take too much time? No, so I want to open it up for questions because I'm sure, saw some heads nodding, so I'm sure you have questions. Whoops, go ahead.
Mr. Samuel.
Andrew, please.
Andrew, please. Is LINKBANk planning an IPO?
We will be listed on what's called the over-the-counter exchange. So the stock will be available for trading. That'll probably happen in early March, okay? But we're not doing a full-blown listing on like NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. That is planned, but down the road.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
What was your degree of Messiah?
So.
Just repeat the question if you don't mind.
What was my degree at Messiah? So I'll be very transparent with you. So my dad, when you grow up in an Indian family, and there's a couple of Indians here, they'll relate to this. There's only 3 things you can do in your life. You have to be a doctor, an engineer, or an accountant. If you're anything, I can tell you, 10 years into my banking career, my dad would look and you're just a banker, but that's he would say, but those are the only 3 things that your parents were happy if you did. So to satisfy my dad, I was an accounting major. I got a degree in accounting, but when I was going through that, I was like, I just don't feel like this is what I want to do. So I got a marketing minor. But here again, guess what I use in my banking career a lot? Accounting principles. God knew better than I did. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, but he prepared me, and a combination of accounting and marketing is perfect for my role, So that's what I was. And I'll expand on that too. My GPA, when I graduated, was 2.2. And I'm not proud of it, but what I want you to know is it's not about the GPA. Entrepreneurialism is so much about people and how to get the most out of people, how to manage people, how to motivate people, how to drive people, how to make decisions. All of those things I've kind of outlined in the book, but that's what's more important. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying fail college. I'm saying you can get a low GPA, that's okay, but pick up everything else that you need to. Anybody else?
That's awesome.
So like when you motivate people, what are some ways that like help you motivate other people to take action?
Yeah, so here's the first thing, you have to be authentic. You know, you can't pretend, you know, people aren't inspired by people who pretend. You have to be authentic, you have to be real, you have to be vulnerable. You have, listen, most people, you know, wouldn't want to tell you they had a 2.2 GPA, isn't that right? You know, I want to be vulnerable. You know, there's nothing pretentious about that, you know. So I think, you know, people are inspired by people who are vulnerable, who are authentic, who they can trust, you know, and those things don't happen in a day or two. You earn that trust over time. I'll give you an example, you know. So when I left Susquehanna, remember, when I left Sovereign to go start Greystone, 35 employees left. That was easy because we started Greystone in Harrisburg and they worked in Harrisburg. When I left Susquehanna, BB&T, and went to Florida, there were a dozen employees that moved to Florida. Okay, now, is that motivation? No, it's trust, it's knowing, they know what to expect from me, operating style, values, etc. But that didn't happen overnight. It's repeatedly, people repeatedly watching you over years and years. You know, and that's what it takes, I think, you know. It's not just getting up and rah, 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 and then going out the door and you're not living those principles, you know. So I would say, you know, you have to be authentic and really have a strong desire to authentically invest in people's lives, to really get them to be willing to follow you, you know, whatever endeavor you're involved in. You know, so does that help? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
How has your wife invested in your life, and this, I can see this
Right.
is your best project right here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But how has she invested in your life and influence? You spoke a little bit about her
Right.
influence.
Oh, so my wife, you know, it's just, we have been fortunate, you know, we've been side to side, we've been true partners through this, you know, and my wife is amazing, you know, it's just, she just has a silent way of supporting me, you know. It's sort of like, she's not judgmental, she doesn't tell me what to do, but she will, when she needs to in those critical situations, she'll let me know what needs to be done. One of the biggest blessings is when we had our first daughter, Alexandria, my wife and I decided that our biggest investment was Jane staying home with the kids, no matter what the price, you know, and we struggled on one income, you know, but we made the decision that investing for this was more important than anything else. So from the time Alex, our oldest, was born, my wife was always a stay-at-home mom, and I'll be honest with you, I would never trade places with her. Never, you know what I mean? And so that's been her biggest investment. And then, of course, coming side by side with me in all of these endeavors as we've gone through, you know what I mean? Okay. Anybody else?
Anyone over here?
You spoke a lot about mentorship, and in that regard, what recommendations do you have to a young person that when you're approaching someone that you would like to seek advice from? You don't have a lot to offer, you don't have a large resume. It's more of gathering information from them, creating a relationship with them. What advice do you have for them to approach it in a respectful manner?
Yeah. No, very good question. You'll be amazed how many seasoned folks there are out there with a lot of experience who are more than happy. But it's you know, the way you approach it, you know what I mean? If it's done in the right way, with humility, with, you know, just a willingness. So I'll give you an example. You know, the gentleman Chuck Pearson who hired me at Commonwealth, I still meet with him every other month. You know, we have breakfast and we talk about things, because guess what? You know, he was a mentor. He still is a mentor to me today, because, you know, every time I sit and have time with him, look, he's retired now. You know, as he would say, a lot of people don't pay attention to him anymore because he's not the CEO anymore. You know what I mean? But the thing is, just he still pours into me. You know, in ways here and there. You know, I could take the approach. I don't really need. No, but Chuck pours into me. You know, but there are people out there, whether they're spiritual mentors, business mentors, you know, it doesn't matter, but you find those people, they're out there, they're in your church, they're in the community, you know, and look for them, you know, and approach them in a way to say, listen, I've observed you, I've watched you, and I've really been inspired by what you've been able to do, what you are doing, how you approach things, and I would like to learn from you. Would you mind spending some time with me? I know you're busy. You know, it doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be every week, but once a month, can we just have coffee? And make it worthwhile for them too, worthwhile in the sense, don't just come rolling out of bed to say, okay, I'm here, so what are we gonna, no, come prepared about things that you're facing, challenges you're facing, things like that you'd like to get feedback on. You'll be amazed how many people are out there more than happy to do that. I can tell you, just looking at this group, there's probably a dozen folks that you can approach here that can be mentors to you in different ways. Anybody else? Thank you all for having me. Appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Wow. Anybody else's heart about jumping out of your chest with some of that stuff? Just powerful. A couple of things that just really jumped out that I want to draw attention to. I love how you incorporated making money being the secondary thing in impacting lives. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that just want to make money, and you know that's not the group that we draw here. But the other thing that we can get stuck with is we separate the money from what we do. And it's like, hey, I'll do this to generate money so I can do good over here. And sometimes there's, you know, you have to, you know, run the books and it's hard to interface with people. But there's an aspect that I really believe in that you shared where those things can come together and you can make money through impacting people, which was amazing. I loved how you lasted one day in retirement.
I think the real beneficiary is my wife.
Yes. Have you read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki?
It's a while back.
Okay.
Yes.
I read that book when I was in ministry,
Okay.
and I set a goal. They have a concept in there where your investment income exceeds your monthly expenses, and then when you do that, you can retire. So I set that carrot up on the stick and chased that thing for a few years. And when we got that, I had the same mindset. My future after that point just looked completely blank. There was nothing there. I was going to spend time with the family and travel and whatever else. It took me about a week. I was been working insane amount of hours and needed to let my body rest. But after about a week, all my energy came back, and I was like, oh my word, the last thing in the world I want to do is slow down. God hasn't called us to go through life on an easy chair. And this group is actually born out of the complete shift that happened during that time, from investing in our own account to investing with the group and taking community and just building what's here. So everybody here is a part of that, and your message just couldn't have been more applicable for this group. So thank you so much.
There's a mentor right there. I'm talking to that gentleman, so I'm sure before he leaves today, he'll be approaching.
Good. Well, hey, shoot me an email. Here's let me put this up there. There's a lot of stuff up there, but we went over a lot of things. Feel free to take a picture. And my email's down here. Jerry's is down here. Some events there. Next meeting. All of that. So, hey, with that, feel free to hang out, build relationship with people. There's so many successful people sitting in the seats next to you that would love to engage. Remember, not everybody is comfortable getting out of your own skin and connecting with the person next to you, so be the one to initiate the conversation, get to know people. God bless you. We will see you next month, and have a great night and week. Good night.